All right, good morning. Good morning. You can make your way on back to your seats. I promise you, you're going to have plenty of time to do a little more meeting and greeting while we share some lunch together after worship. I was told by Kim in our worship planning meeting earlier this week that I have 12 minutes for the sermon today. So we need to. Oh, there. That's my dad and last week's preacher clapping the loudest. Really glad you're here this morning. Oh, I don't know what to say after something like that happens, other than I'm glad that everybody else is here as well this morning. We're going to have a lot of fun getting to share a meal together this morning, and just want to highlight a couple of things that are coming up for all of us here at Rhythm City. One of them, if this is one of your first few times here at Rhythm City, snag one of those connection cards that are on the tables in front of you. Fill that out and place it in the offering basket that's going to be passed around in just a minute. We would love to get to connect with you and share a few things with you. In fact, this coming week, we're going to be sending out a survey, and we want some feedback from you. And so if you're not on our email subscription list, would you just put your email, your name on the connection card and put email subscription in the comments there, and we'll make sure you also get added to that. We want to make sure that you're connected as well and can give us some of that feedback from that survey. The big thing to let you know about is 2 weeks from today, February 4th, that's Super Bowl Sunday, we're starting our next round of partnership classes. It's a 4-week series where you come before worship from 9:30 to 10:30. And we go through some of the basics of the faith, what we believe here at Rhythm City, and then also the methodology of Rhythm City and why we do the ministry, the way that we do it, and how God's leading us in that. So we'd love for you to sign up for that. You can do all that on the app, Rhythm City Church. You can just search for that, download it onto your phone, and sign up for the partnership class that starts in 2 weeks. But today, we're starting a brand new series called Flip Forward. 4 different paradigms that we need to flip upside down, if you will, if we're going to move forward as a church. Take a look.
I've been wrestling with purpose. What was I created for? I'm more than what you see on the surface. See beneath my skin and scars, I'm skinned and scarred, marred and twisted, scarred by the past. I need to be lifted, and sometimes I question my own existence. What was I put here for? In my seams, it seems that there seems to be more. It's like I'm a light, unplugged from the socket. I mean, do I really exist to put money in my pocket? This 9 to 5 feels like a 9 to 9. My mind entwined, I pass the time, life circles me as I wait. What is my estate? I feel like I was made for something great, and yet I can't quite put my finger on it. But when I look at my fingers and I see their design, I realize I'm one of a kind, and something created me. No, someone created me, and that someone made me for a reason. Even though it's clear the past years have been treason, I still sense this drawing, this calling, that even in the midst of my falling, there was someone who died to pick me up, someone who rose to fix me up, someone who's coming back to lift me up. And that someone is Jesus. See, God made me for a purpose, and when I delight in Him, it's brought to the surface.
This is going to be an exciting year for our church as we transition to a new worship location, Clementine in West Nashville, as we're putting together a new ministry team that's already off and running and leading things like outreach to the community around Clementine, outreach with foster care in our city in Middle Tennessee. outreach to the homeless in our city and making sure that they have a safe place to rest in the evening and expanding that as we look ahead. Our board of directors, making sure that as far as we are organizationally and methodologically, we're moving forward aligned as a church and looking at how we journey together to connect the disconnected. There's a lot to be excited about. And over the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk about how we step into that and step into this new season as a church in 2018 with all the things that are bubbling up, with all the things that God seems to be stirring in us. Perhaps there are some ways that we as a church and you as individuals can live in such a way as to embrace where God's leading us. How do we live so as to move forward as a church? What are the paradigms that we currently function in that if we just flip them upside down will help us move forward as a church? And together we're taking a look at this new theme today, from me to we. You can probably tell from the video that there's definitely a focus on purpose, your purpose, our purpose as a church. And one of the first times that I think it was a huge milestone in my life when it comes to recognizing purpose was the time when I was just about to receive my first real paycheck. Does everybody remember back to that? Or some of you are about to step into that world, and so you currently are thinking, man, all the money that I'm about to make, I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to buy a car. All right, this is everything that I thought. I'm going to make how many thousands of dollars? Oh, man, $20,000, $30,000 a year. And, you like have these dreams at night where you're like, you've just bought a brand new car. You've just engaged in 3 new hobbies. Like you've done all this kind of stuff. You've planned all the vacations that you're about to go on in the next 6 weeks, and all these things. In the meantime, while all that stuff is happening, you like have this vision of just like throwing dollar bills around in your house, right? It's just like, I'm going to be making some money. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to have so much money left over. But if you've been there and done that, what do you quickly discover? Oh, wow, that money doesn't go as far as I thought it was going to. Oh, wow, car insurance or home insurance or bills or utilities or phone bills or mortgages or rent or all these different things. Man, they take up a lot more of your income, right? And before you get to that point, it's just lollipops and unicorns. Everything's going to be awesome. Once you've gotten past that and you've accrued $3,000 in credit card debt and now don't realize how you're going to be able to pay it off because you thought you had more than you actually did, it's probably something about the experience of going through it that teaches you that maybe there was something that I didn't see coming, right? It's only through experience and even maturity, if you will, that you learn to have a different perspective on things, that you learn how to maybe handle things a little more wisely. And I want to invite you to open to Hebrews chapter 10, either on your phone or at the Bible on your table there, because the author of Hebrews, who we don't know for sure who wrote the book of Hebrews, but God, through this inspired writer, seems to be speaking from somebody who's been there, done that, and is looking back and saying, you guys should listen to my experience. You should listen to my maturity. I've kind of encountered some of these things, and here's what you might want to value as you discover God's purpose for you in your life, as you discover God's purpose for your church as well. So open up to Hebrews chapter 10. And I want us to just take a quick look at a few of the things that the author has to say here, especially down at verse 19. Here's what the author says. He kind of sets the foundation for us. He says, therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain, that is his body, and since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near to God. He's talking foundational language here. As you're considering your purpose, as that video was stirring in you, perhaps you're seeing the foundation that the author of Hebrews wants to lay down for us here, speaking from a place of maturity, speaking from a place of experience. He says there in verse 22, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. He who promised is faithful. Not the one who received the promise is faithful, but he who promised the faithful. The author here wants to make sure that before he dives into this next step that we're about to talk about in verse 24, that it's very clear our foundation is Jesus. And so he references a couple of things that we're supposed to do together. He talks about this cleansing of the water, a reference to baptism, that regularly as the people of God, we remember the forgiveness of sins and the adoption of sonship and daughtership into the family of God as who we are. Foundational language. He references the blood of Jesus, the body of Jesus, what we're about to celebrate in just a few moments, the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross for us, that by his body and his blood, we are forgiven. We are empowered and given strength to follow him. Our foundation is Jesus. Your foundation is Jesus. For our church, our foundation is Christ alone. But then the author of Hebrews gives us a next step to consider. This is where we start to talk about the transition from functioning with me first to we first. Look at verse 24. He says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. You see, now that the author's kind of set this foundation, he says, now how do you go about living out your daily lives, pursuing this purpose that God has for you? How do you take that next step? And he uses all of this together language. He doesn't talk about how I do this or how you should do this individually. He talks about how let us consider together, how we encourage one another, how we spur one another on in doing good deeds and following Jesus. He uses this kind of language so as to encourage us to remember not only are we not alone in this, but that we are to encourage and receive encouragement from one another. Because it's right here when we start to wrestle with this moving from this mentality of me to we, embracing this paradigm shift that doesn't value self first, but values being together and journeying together first. It's in this place that maybe there's a little bit of tension for you and I, because this is where we have to come to grips. If we're going to understand the paradigm flip from me to we have to confront the truth that there's weakness in me, but there is strength in we. We don't like being told that there's weakness. We don't like becoming aware of what we're not good at or where we are tempted or where our fallacies are. We don't like being told those things. And so to hide that from others, we isolate instead of gather. Right? We keep people at an arm's length instead of bringing them closer and being vulnerable with each other. We believe the lie that we can go farther alone than we could together. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. When we value how God has brought each of us together in different ways, we start to experience the strength that God gives us as we move from me to we. I'll never forget the summer when I went to a camp as a kid. And this camp had a high ropes obstacle course. And so a couple of days during the week, you got to put on your harness and get all your belay loops and ropes and carabiners and all that kind of stuff hooked up, and you go climbing up into the trees. And there was this one obstacle called the Hourglass. And it had 2 trees, and in between the 2 trees were 3 ropes kind of all tangled together and spread far apart. And it wasn't made to be easy to get from tree A to tree B. And so it was a pretty difficult thing. And so I climbed up there, and it was about halfway through the obstacle that I realized I'm getting a little bit tired. This is harder than it looks on the ground. And I was about at the point where I was ready to give up. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it was at the point of where I was about to give up. And it was a couple of my teammates down on the ground who, even though this was kind of this individual exercise where only one person could be up in the obstacle at a time, it suddenly became a team-oriented thing where it was the voices and the encouragement and the cheering on of everybody behind me that helped me keep going, don't give up, don't let go yet. You can make it, you can do it. And it was because of their encouragement I was able to get to the other side. It was astonishing to me how much the impact and the encouragement, the spurring on of everyone else around me helped me get to the goal and fulfill the purpose, if you will, of what I was trying to do. Now, what was truly remarkable was that after I jumped down, one of our friends was about to climb up there. And this friend of ours had a pretty severe physical disability. And so from the get-go, everyone was just pretty hopeful that he'd be able to climb up the tree, and probably knew that he wasn't going to be able to even maybe get onto the obstacle that was in between the 2 trees, and probably just would climb the tree and that would be good. So he took one step up onto the tree, and everyone is already roaring behind him, encouraging him and saying, you can do it, keep taking another step, keep going. And he'd go step after step without a single moment of silence from the team around him, this team that should just be observing, just watching, because this is an individual thing, made themselves a part of the team by encouraging and rallying around him. And sure enough, he got all the way to the top of the tree, to the platform, which was already an incredible feat for him to make it all the way up to that part of the tree. And I think he probably thought, this was good enough. This was farther than I thought I was going to make it. I'll just jump down now. But don't you know, everybody on the ground started saying, go ahead. Take that next step. Come on, you can do it. You made it this far. Don't give up now. We know you can do it. And he takes that first step, and it's onto a rope with 2 ropes high overhead that he can barely reach. And you can see him wobbling back and forth. And every step, every bit of the way was this strenuous, hard, just rigorous physical activity that was really hard. And everybody was encouraging him. And it took not just a few minutes to accomplish this, but after about 45 minutes to an hour, he got all the way to the other side, accomplished the task. It was amazing how, because nobody saw this as just an individual thing, nobody said, oh, this is just your thing, you go tackle the obstacle, but everybody took partial ownership. Everybody leaned in. Everybody rallied around him, that he took something that was seen as impossible and tackled it. See, when we consider how God's calling us as a church to move from a culture of me to a culture of we, it begs us to wrestle with the fact that in this culture that we live in today, where everyone thinks that your faith is just your individual relationship and it's all on you to make sure that you keep things right with God, that when you move from me to we, you actually discover you have a team around you to spur you on. And in a culture in American Christianity that exists today, where perhaps anything that is perceived as impossible is just written off, when we move from me to we, in the unity of Christ as our foundation, the impossible becomes just a matter of time. There's incredible power in unity. There were so many other passages we could go to and look at. And maybe you want to discover some of those things. Some of the passages about how the body is not one part but many parts. And so we all come together to fulfill the function of the body that God has entrusted to his church. You go to other parts of Scripture that talk about how unity is actually the message that will show the church proof that Jesus came, died, and rose again, and he's coming back someday. There's so many places where you could go to talk about the power of moving from a me-first mentality to a we-first mentality. But might you just consider what the author of Hebrews says? Would we spur on one another? Encourage one another? And there's some very tangible ways that you can do that. I just want to give you a couple of those. And I've got a, no joke, brief list of 10 things here. Just very simple, just quick little things. And maybe there's one that sticks out to you that you want to just jot down and say, this is something that will help me move from a me-first culture to a we-first culture. Number one, regular worship together. So as to see our impossibly stubborn sin wiped away by the grace of God on a weekly basis. 2, celebrating the Lord's Supper regularly, which we're about to do in just a moment, where we come and profess our faith, saying, this is what we commonly believe together. Not just this is what I believe, but this is what we believe. And we're together in this and receiving the forgiveness of sins and the strength and the power that comes through the blood of Christ. Number 3, eating meals together. And guess what? Because this was a 12-minute sermon, we've actually carved out time in, is it 12 minutes? Doggone it. Because this was like a 16-minute sermon, we're going to save time and end worship early so that we together can experience that eating a meal together. It might just be something we do 3 times a day, but when we eat a meal together, it can actually be a really sacred act of worship where we honor God by sharing our lives with one another. I mean, when thousands of people came to faith at Pentecost, the very next verses say the things that they prioritize, all these new believers, one of those things was eating meals together regularly. If Scripture's talking about the importance of sharing a meal together, then I think we can make space for it in our worship on Sundays together. Couple of other things. Gathering together in our homes and our Rhythm City groups. And if that hasn't been a part of your life, then today is an awesome day where maybe you can meet some of the community group leaders that are in the room and just ask about what's it look like and how much food would I have to bring, and that's too much. I'm going to go to this group over here because they just ordered pizza or whatever it may be, but it's just time for you to experience how you do life together. It's a priority of moving from me to we. Texting somebody that you haven't seen in a while, say, hey, how you doing? I miss you. Sharing your meals together outside of Sunday morning. Taking each other for coffee and say, hey, I don't really know you that well. Let's grab some coffee this week. Praying for one another. Discipling one another. Serving together. The next couple of weeks, this is what we're going to talk about how we do these things together, how we journey together as we connect disconnected people. I want to ask you to pray about what that next step for you looks like. How might you spur someone else on? How might you encourage someone else as we go forward together, starting with this foundation rooted in Christ? And that's where we spend our time now. It's being reminded and collectively, actively celebrating that Jesus laid down his life for each of us, that he is our firm, unshakable foundation. Everything we have and everywhere we're going is rooted first and foremost in him and his grace.